Today I'm going to review the Velo-Orange Piolet. Is it a mountain bike, a bike packing bike, a clunker? Find out in this video. Welcome back, Pathless Peddlers, and if you're new here, we're all about the non-competitive side of cycling. If that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button or consider supporting the channel by buying a sticker or a patch, because I am just but a humble sticker salesman with a YouTube channel. The Velo-Orange, or Velo-Orange as I like to pronounce it, Piolet, is their bike packing slash rough road riding bike. It's got an all steel frame and fork. The fork is triple bedded. It has all the mounts and it has this really cool segmented look to it. I think it matches beautifully with the rear end of the bike, which has this kind of wishbone design. I think this is done so it can accommodate big tires without having to bend those seat stays. On the rear of the bike has lots of mounts. You could run fenders and a rear rack. One nice touch, which I also appreciate, is although this bike is set up one by, it does have a braze-on to run a bottom pull derailleur. As you guys know, I've personally ditched one by and love bikes that still keep that two by functionality. Looking at the components, this one was spec'd out with 27.5 by 2.6 inch tires in the Maxxis Ardent Race. Definitely more aggressive than a gravel tire, not as chunky as a full-on downhill tire. So it really threads that needle of rougher road, rougher double track terrain. They're mounted onto some tubeless VO rims. The bike is disc brake and it's spec'd out with these Japanese Growtac disc brakes. I don't know if you can get them in the US yet. I think they'll end up on the Velo-Orange store soon, but I gotta say, these brakes are really, really good. If there's a mechanical disc brakes that would give Pauls a run for the money, it just might be these Growtacs. Anodized color aside, these brakes have amazing stopping power. They also feel really interesting in the lever. There's a real kind of dampened pull, more like a hydraulic disc brake. I've not had any problems with one finger braking with these brakes. I do want to stress I haven't spent a ton of time with them, so I can't speak to their long-term longevity or how they do on like a 3,000 foot descent. The calipers do seem a little bit small, so I'm curious about heat dissipation and all those things. But if you're doing mostly road riding or gravel and not extreme mountain biking, I think these are brakes to consider. And those brakes are attached to some Grand Cru brake levers. These might be my first time using them and they're really, really nice. One cool thing about these brake levers is that you can actually use them on both road diameter bars. So let's say a mustache bar or an albastache bar, and shim them down to mountain bike bars. Really well made and lots of versatility. Speaking of bars, oh boy, check out these ones. These are the clunker bars. I know they look very childlike, BMX-like, but they are super fun. They have a nice sweep back to them, so it puts your hands in a more ergonomic position. They also have a fair amount of rise. So if you're converting a bike with low stack height, then this is a bar to check out. I love the sweep. I love the retro vibes. They're awesome for gravel descent. Maybe swept back a little too much for real like technical single track. But if you want a fun and bomber alt bar to try out, check out the clunkers. Last few things in the cockpit are these cork grip, and the shifters are the Sensa CRX Pro shifters. Moving on to the drivetrain of the bike, it's got some XT cranks. I believe these are a 32 tooth. The rear cassette is an 11 to 46 in 11 speeds, and the rear derailleur is a Sensa CRX Pro. I think the derailleur looks a little bit garish with the white and the red and the black, but the shifting is pretty dang good. After a while of riding, I forgot that it wasn't a Shimano drivetrain. I never had a misshift. It was responsive enough. And to me, it feels par to a mid to mid upper tier Shimano group set. And to top it all off is a Trans X jump seat dropper seat post, which is lever actuated. That's right, you reach down between your legs and pull the lever thing and you can get your drop. Saddle is an Ergon saddle. It's one of my favorite brands in terms of saddles. Specifically, it is the SMC4L. If you like wider, flatter saddles like I do, then Ergon's a pretty good choice. I tested a size medium, which is the perfect choice if you want to run a swept back bar. If I were going to ride it with drop bars or a bit more forward position, I would have sized down to size small. And as you see it here on the scales, it is 31 pounds. Enough of the boring stuff. How does the bike actually ride? First thing I want to point out is your choice of bars and your body position is going to greatly affect the front end handling on any bike and on this bike in particular. I rode it with the clunker bars, which put my primary hand position pretty much in line with the axis of steering, if not slightly behind it. The bike has a 71.5 head tube angle, and when combined with its fork rake and the tire size, the trail is fairly low at 52. That number is deceiving, however, because I don't think it takes into account the width of the tire, which adds this thing called pneumatic trail, which then effectively increases the trail feeling of the bike, if that makes sense. Basically, what that means with a swept back handlebar is that the bike steers on the nimble side, which is the complete opposite direction of your modern long and low and super slack mountain bike. This means that the bike is really manageable at low speeds. It doesn't wander across the road like a drunken goat. It's also really quick to change lines or pick your way through rocks with this bike. Anything, this bike actually reminds me of a 90s mountain bike in the front. It has that nimbleness of a smaller 26-inch wheel, but because it is a bigger wheel and tire, it feels a lot better in terms of suspension, but it also has much better rollover. It won't get hung up on those dips or redirected by those rocks that a smaller 26-inch wheel would. You get all of that light steering, but it's also more stable. On flat terrain, the bike just plows through everything. On climbs, it was actually a pleasant climber. The rear chainstay is 460 on the longer side. You don't get that jumpy, spicy rear end when you're out of the saddle, so it's more of a smooth climbing bike. In terms of going downhill, the bike did take some adjustment, just as it would take if you were gonna ride a 90s mountain bike today. You have to get used to that nimble steering, but once you do, it's just a blast. It just bombs downhill. You got nice and big supple tires. Again, I do think there is some flexibility in changing how the front end feels. If you're using drop bars or a hand position, which places your hands a little bit more forward of the steering axis, a little bit more weight on the front wheel, then I think that would make the front end feel a little bit more neutral, a little bit more stable. Overall, this was a super fun bike. A lot of ways, I think this rode how I wanted my 90s mountain bike conversion to ride, without all the shenanigans to get the bars higher and swapping out the brakes for a bigger tire with more rollover. So I think if you want to go for that 90s mountain bike vibe without dealing with all that hassle, then the Piolet is definitely a bike to check out. I did hear from Igor that the next iteration of the frame is going to be through axle. So if that's been the only thing holding you back, then fear not. The TAs are coming. For dislikes, there wasn't a whole lot, but if I were to tweak one thing, I do wish that it had a little bit more of a sloping top tube, just so that the dropper post would be more functional. I think this is a bike that is screaming to be used with a dropper post, and unfortunately, unless you have really long legs, which I do not, you can put the dropper on it, but it's not gonna drop very much. But otherwise, that's actually the only con. I loved everything else about the bike. I love how it looks. I love its utility, and it's super versatile. You can build it up as a fun clunker like this, as an off-road drop bar touring bike, or as a retro XC bike, which kind of bucks the trend of super high trail slack mountain bikes of today. That's what I think. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And if you guys appreciate these reviews, the amount of detail I go into, then please consider supporting the channel by buying a sticker, a patch, or joining us on Patreon. Even better. As always, everybody, keep the supple side down.